of our fresh water.
Question number 9, David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, does he stand by all his statements?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes.
Supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In light of his statement that he's not losing any sleep over the Auditor-General's report, can he confirm that he personally attended the dinner with Sky City on the 4th of November 2009 and that he personally instructed officials to stop their normal work on the tender process? And if so, are the officials responsible for his personal actions, or is he?
Right Honourable Prime
Mr
Minister.
Speaker, I don't think the member is actually representing the report accurately. I certainly went to the dinner on the 4th, but let me go through the OAG report, which says the main question underlying this inquiry was whether the government's decision to negotiate with Sky City had been influenced by inappropriate considerations.
Point of order, Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, it was a very specific question. It did not ask the general lines in the OAG report. It was a detailed question, and the Prime Minister showed no intention of getting close to it.
Well, look, point of order, Gerry Brown.
Mr Speaker, speaking to that point of order, I think it's interesting to note that the primary question asked the Prime Minister if he stood by all his statements. To then go on and ask him about when he attended a dinner or didn't seems to be wildly away from statements he's made. The fact is that the material facts of that matter are in the report.
My difficulty with the answer is I frankly couldn't hear it because of the noise that was coming from the Labor benches. I'm going to ask the Leader of the Opposition to re-ask the question. The Prime Minister is quite within his order to say if it's specific enough. He doesn't have that information, so the member may ask the question again, but I'd like to have the ability to hear the answer with some degree of silence within the House.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In light of his question and his statement that he is not losing any sleep over the Auditor-General's report, can he confirm that he personally attended the dinner with Sky City on the 4th of November 2009 and that he personally instructed officials to stop their normal work on the tender process? And if so, are the officials responsible for his personal actions or him?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes, I attended the dinner, and no, I didn't ask them to stop any tendering process. Mr Speaker, as I said before I was interrupted before, the main underlying question of the report was whether the government's decision to negotiate with Sky City had been influenced by inappropriate considerations such as connections between political and business leaders.
Point of order.
He answered the question, and we don't need a long, rambling explanation. Sir.
Well, I think the Prime Minister has very satisfactorily answered the question. If the member doesn't want any further answer to that question, that's okay. Does he have further supplementary?
Yes, further supplementary. Can he explain the Deputy Auditor? Can he explain the Deputy Auditor General's comments? Quote: "The meetings and discussions between government representatives and Sky City were materially different in quantity and kind than those between the government and other parties."
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, again, Mr Speaker, the report needs to be read in context. What the Auditor-General makes quite clear in her report is that there was nothing inappropriate, in fact quite normal, that the government and Sky City and others would have discussions. The nature of those discussions were always going to be different because of different proposals that were there. The Auditor-General actually supports that because she says it's an unusual process, and as I said, she herself says, and I quote, "We see no evidence to suggest that the final decision to negotiate with Sky City was influenced by any inappropriate considerations," which is total vindication. We did nothing wrong.
Supplementary.
In light of
Supplementary
his
question, David
last answer, can the Prime Minister explain the Deputy Auditor-General's comment, quote, "We do not consider that the evaluation process was transparent or even-handed"?
That's right. Yes. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, the Deputy Auditor-General makes it quite clear in the report that she has some procedural issues, but no substantive issues whatsoever. Says there was no different conclusions that would be drawn, and goes on to say we see no evidence to suggest that the final decision to negotiate with Sky City was influenced by any inappropriate consideration. She also says at length in the report that this was not a normal procurement, and in fact the government would always be looking for innovative and creative ways of doing things.
Supplementary question.
Thank you,
David
Mr. Speaker.
Shearer.
Why did Sky City send designs for a 5,000-seat centre directly to the Prime Minister's office after a 4th of November 2009 dinner meeting between the Prime Minister and Sky City?
Very good question.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Because people send proposals all the time to our office, and the Auditor-General says in her report that is absolutely, totally appropriate that government ministers and organisations would have discussions. What then follows is an expressions of interest process, and that process followed.
Oh, don't start.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary.
David Shearer.
Do these meetings that he held with Sky City, as the Deputy Auditor-General's report alleges, represent an unfair advantage to Sky City or not?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Auditor-General notes there was no substantial advantage. What she says is there's some procedural issues around an unusual and bespoke different way of procurement. She also says that's quite normal in the environment we're in, and fundamentally there was no substantive issues. I also note, and I should say, Mr. Speaker, that the other members of the other participants who put in bids said themselves that they were not worried, not concerned, and she goes on to say there were substantial advantages that supported the Sky City deal.
Question number 10, Alf Naro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Community and Voluntary Sector. What recent announcements has she made regarding government support for volunteering?
Mr. Speaker.